Good afternoon, everyone. We'll just give your colleagues few minutes to join us before we start. So enjoy some relaxing Hauser music before we start. Okay, Jean, I think we can start. Good afternoon, everyone. I think with 100 plus in attendance, we can definitely kickstart the session and we will wait for your colleagues to join us. So a big welcome. I'm looking at the attendance and seeing so many that are joining us again this week, but I also see some new names. So a big welcome to our new joiners, to our lovely growing community, and thank you for the hellos that I've just started getting. I just love our commercial community. It just gets from strength to strength, whether it's up or down. We woke up this morning to the news of the ceasefire extension. We're all happy, encouraged, yes, but this is not quite what we are all hoping for. We want our skies to be packed with airlines. We want this to truly end. We want travel to return. We want to really be ready for a mega celebration. And from HSMAI, I promise for those that are based in UAE or in Cairo, it will be the biggest and the best Thirsty Thursday or Tuesdays together ever. For now, let us all stay hopeful. Personally, I can't believe we are already in week eight of this madness. And while the headlines remain tough, the road is still unclear. One thing we are certain of, we cannot stand still. So therefore, if it's a project that you've had no time to attend to in the past because you were very busy, a skill you want to sharpen, or a technology you want to better understand so you're ready to press that go button when the times come, this is truly the moment. We must find opportunities in the pressure that we're living under. It is your perfect time to reset. And this is exactly what our Wednesday series is all about. Every Wednesday at 4 p.m., 4 p.m. GST, we bring a different topic, either to skill or an upskill. Some may be relevant to all, other topics may be relevant to a specific discipline, but I have to say, even though today is about F&B, our session today has resonated across the board because I'm seeing audience attending from all disciplines within commercial. If there is one area of our business that deserves real attention when demand is under pressure or even in peak of the peak, it is F&B. It is an area that is often underestimated or underoptimized. It is therefore my utmost pleasure to welcome our speaker for today, Judith Cartwright, founder and managing director of Black Coral Consulting, known to many of you. Her work has helped hotels in our region and globally, not just to survive softer demand periods, but to come out sharper, leaner, and stronger. Judith is, for us in HSMAI, a very active board member within our revenue leadership group who has supported me personally and the association for over 5 years. And for those that attend our annual commercial strategy conference in November, and yes, it is happening again, November 2026 at the Conrad Dubai, you must have as well met her in person or listened to one of her panels. Today's session will focus on F&B revenue optimization and how to drive performance when demand is under pressure. Before I hand over to Judith, some few housekeeping notes. This is a webinar, so you cannot see who's attending, and we have you all on mute, but we want engagement because this is not a one-way session. It's a webinar. It's an open conversation. You can just simply raise your hand and we will activate your audio and camera to enable you to ask that question live. And if you feel more comfortable sending the Q&A, just send us the Q&A, and either Judith will pick up the question or I act as her voice of God, will raise my hand on your behalf, ask the question, and Judith can attend to the answer. With that said, I will now turn my camera off and I pass it over to Judith, and keep those questions coming. It's not a we sit, we listen, we exit. No, let's have a conversation and an engagement. We just cannot have you all on camera. We currently have 120 people attending with us. So a meeting session will not be possible. With that said, over to you, Judith. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mona, for having me, and welcome everyone. And thank you for taking the time to join us on today's webinar. On total revenue optimization, and today we're focusing on F&B and restaurant. It's when the demand slows, every decision matters even more than before. And so does also every missed opportunity in order to manage and navigate through this business. And this is not a slowdown, it's a system shock that we're experiencing right now. And this one has come in full force. It has certain parallels to COVID, but it's still very different. And during the COVID times, we have learned a lot. And the swing that no one has planned for is prior to the geopolitical conflict, the pressure growth was expected to be 13% above. And now we have seen on average a demand drop by 40%. Some businesses, they have experienced a much, much stronger drop, whilst others are navigating. So that's just the average. And the demand didn't disappear entirely, but it's shifting, and also on how the end consumer or where the end consumer is coming from. We're missing the long haul tourism footfall. It's a lot now, it was a lot over volume versus the value mindset. And it was a very broad audience and lower scrutiny. There were certain restaurants where you had to book, 1 or 2 weeks in advance, or some even a whole month in advance in order to get your preferred timing slot. And that all has now disappeared, pretty much overnight. It's now the domestic market that is leading. And it's a lot more focused on the value-driven experiences. Some markets are slowly but surely coming back, and you do see some of the tourists still coming into Dubai. But for the amount of choice there is, and for the amount of supply, the demand does not correlate with that. And then how does the industry default to that? And I must say, I'm really proud to see a lot of the industry and a lot of the hotels, but then also restaurants in terms of the response. The default response is usually coming out with discounting, more promotions, and then it just becomes, a whole menu bloat. But it's been very subtle. Dubai as a destination has worked extremely hard to position itself as a luxury destination, and the entire UAE. And that also applies to some of the other GCC countries and other countries that are impacted by that now, that are impacted with the through traffic, that was serviced by the Gulf carriers. That the discounting is happening very subtle. It's not so much in the face. The messaging is very good, and it's targeted to the domestic market and to the UAE residents. And you don't control the demand. That's out of your control right now, but you control how much value you capture. So the demand that's in the market, you're in control on how much you can actually capture with that. And with one of the items, I would like to jump straight into the menu engineering piece, which is so important. And hotels are doing menu engineering, restaurants are doing menu engineering. But this is really now the opportunity to take a real deep dive into the granularity of the menu engineering. And then also to reflect and take a look at how well is your team working on that whole menu engineering approach. Is it happening in isolation? Is it done by the chef? Is it done by the restaurant director, or is the whole menu engineering exercise done collectively as a team between the culinary department, the F&B operations, the finance department, the revenue department, and then also from a sales and marketing perspective? And I'll get back to that at a later stage to tell you why that is so important. What we take a look at is the profitability. And these are just a couple of examples on how people approach menu engineering. Whether you have, A, B, C, or D, you look at different things. You look at the selling price, the food cost, the percentage of the food cost, and then you look at, okay, so what's actually my most profitable item? And that's a lot of times where it stops. But then when you take this down another layer and you actually go deep into the grid and you look at your puzzles, your stars, the dogs, and the horses. And when you look at the puzzles, those are menu items that are not popular, but have a high profitability. And that's untapped potential. So that's where you could take a look at, okay, how can you promote this and reposition that? This could be something when you have an item that is very high in profitability. Is there an opportunity then from a social media perspective that you're promoting this across your social channels? Or then also when you look at your waiters in the restaurant that could promote this as part of the upselling. Or you might think, okay, it's profitable, but it's not popular. Is it actually what the customer wants? And those are then the items that the team can collectively work through. The stars are popular and they're profitable. You can keep them. How can you push them even more? Especially when the demand now is less, then how can you really convert even more of the stars? And, I've not even spoken once about that you should be increasing your prices here. It's just really pushing what is working. The dogs, it's very quick to remove them from the menu. May not be the right solution, or it may be the right solution. That's what needs to be analyzed. And the dogs are those that are just simply not moving at all. They're not really profitable. So that's really where you need to see. And sometimes all you have to do is tweak some of the ingredients or the sourcing of the ingredients in order to make them more profitable, give them a different description in order for them to convert. And then you have the horses, and these are well-loved menu items, but they're not profitable. And again, you don't have to remove them straight away. It's review them, how else you might be able to make them more profitable. And that's where these departments really need to work together, so that if you have a profitable item on the menu that the chef wants to sell, but then on social media you're promoting another one, then that's what defeats the purpose. But the social media team very often might not know what is the most profitable item, and that's why it's so important to work together on that. And in order to work together on that, that's where you have a tool. That's where you can take a look at each item. How many have been sold? What is the sales mix? What is the food cost? What is the selling price? And what is the margin per item? The total revenue, and then what's the contribution margin? And then that tool will then give you the profitability, the popularity, and will class it for you into stars, cows, puzzles, and dogs. And then from there, then you can deep dive and you can say, okay, what is it that we want to keep? What was it that we want to tweak? And what do we remove altogether? And that's when that shift happens. So then you don't just look at A, B, C, and D, but then you actually look at how many items have been sold. And then that might give you a different outcome by then just, instead of just looking at it, how much is the selling price and how much is the food cost? And the classic model is missing. It's a traditional menu engineering ignores 4 critical variables that define profitability in a pressured market. It's also important to take a look at the labor cost, the execution and the complexity of the item, and the channel fit. Now, you might have identified that there is an item that is profitable based on the menu engineering grid, but it might be very labor intensive, or it might take a long time to execute until then the food comes out onto the table. And that's where, it's now a good opportunity to take a look back, and, it might be as easy as, okay, reducing the items that take a long time to prepare, that are cumbersome, and that are also difficult to understand for the end consumer, maybe also for the waiter, to remove them and to focus on those that you can turn as often as possible in order to drive those revenues. And what you need to ask yourself with every single item is, does it make money? And does it sell? Can it be executed efficiently? And does it deserve the space on your menu? Do you have too much on the menu and not enough profitability? It was a flagship outlet that we have worked with, but they had over 70 items on the menu, but only 25% drove the revenue. And what happens, you have the impact on the food waste, the strain on the kitchen, the service, but also the guest spend. A lot of times, if the menu is too complicated, the guests cannot make the decision. And then the guests, they decide on what's the quickest on the menu or what they remember. And that's just then when items that don't drive the revenues, remove them, maybe simplify your menu now. That's then also on how you can manage this food cost more effectively. You can train your teams on the upselling, not just in terms of then the starter, the main course, and also the dessert. And with everything that's also going on at the moment with the wellness and the longevity, the end consumer being a lot more mindful on how they're eating. Do we still have to focus on 3 courses? Do we still have to focus on multi-courses? And this will be different for every restaurant that you have, even within your own hotel. But those are the type of questions that you can start asking now from a strategic side, when you then again, to collectively as a team decide on how to move forward.
Judith, I'm sorry to interrupt you. You have to keep an eye on my hand.
Mm-hmm.
When I raise it, it's because I have a question from the audience. So there's a question
Okay.
to you. You mentioned an important point. How do we capture maximum demand in such times? No amount of discounting or promotions that will increase demand. So how do we maximize conversion?
It's yeah, no, it's very good. And I think that's also in terms of maximizing conversion. The first thing that I would check is, are your systems set up correctly? Can I book you online? Are your time slots open? Do you have to revisit now, your meal durations or not? And that's also something that I found now personally here in Dubai. I wanted to make a booking at a restaurant and I couldn't book an early seating, which I found very odd. So then I called up and then I was able to make it. It's then also being active across social media, being active in your communities. We're all in various WhatsApp groups. I've seen a lot of dining opportunities, and there are then also there was like a document that was put together with certain dining benefits. You might also now be able to run a promotion where you might have had tables that required a minimum spend. You might now be able just to have that from a strategic side available, to, let's say, certain meal periods or somebody who books. That's really on how I would now capture demand. Something that was very restrictive in the past because there was so much demand and you had to be restrictive because you wanted to optimize that demand. Now you can also take a look at, how can you be more lenient? Or do you still want to have the credit card guarantee? Do you change the terms and conditions? And you have to see what works for your business and how do you protect it in the short term and how do you protect it in the long term? And more choice, just coming back to the menu itself, more choice doesn't guarantee you more revenues. So take a look at, usually when you go through a menu engineering exercise, you can shift it and you can cut 15 to 25% of the items that are on the menu. That helps to protect your stars that you have and it reduces the complexity. And that's the optimization for reality and in not ideal conditions, fewer items then also helps you to prep faster. It helps you to achieve higher margins because you are controlling your food cost a lot more. And you're also a lot more channel specific on how you want to sell it, and then also what audience you are catering to. And it's then also you reduce a lot of the food wastage. And then once you have done that, then we're moving into the menu design and the pricing. Oops, sorry. It's one of the first reactions, let's discount to drive traffic. If that discount is not communicated out to the market, nobody knows about it. And then the customer who's ready to buy is then diluting your revenues that they would have spent anyway. So discounting is not a strategy. Bundling is. So now if you have bundled offers and you promote them smartly, or then you have certain upselling packages at the restaurant itself in order for the customer to buy something they might not have bought, and that is a strategy. But just the pure discounting is not a strategy. But you can have then the reframe. Don't just make it cheaper, but attract price-sensitive guests who don't return at a full price. And when you take a step back and you look at how room rates fluctuate throughout the year, there is a seasonality. But restaurants very rarely have a seasonality. And the customer who spends, and I'm just taking the coffee now, the peak season customer spends the same amount of money for a coffee than a low season customer who is more price sensitive on the room rate, but is still expected to spend that same amount of money for a coffee. So that's also maybe something to take a look at now. Are you able to have certain bundle offers? Are you able to offer maybe a free coffee at the end, with the dessert, something like that? Because that also then is a nice experience for the customer. They feel valued. And, there are times, a lot of times we all didn't feel valued, and you just had to monitor the social media comments now that some of the restaurants are looking for the residents here to help support them and to support local. But then a lot of residents did not feel supported when, during the heydays here. And make it worth it. Add perceived value, experience or presentation, storytelling. This could also be now, that you do get to experience maybe then also with the head chef you learn something more about the kitchen, how the food is sourced, how the food is prepared. Now that it's not as busy, for some restaurants, there might be an opportunity to offer something to your loyal guests that have always been loyal, but also to attract a new customer by storytelling and by offering an experience that you would not have had normally. The bundling smartly to increase spend per head, and then to communicate the quality. And then the guests, they do choose, for the confidence and not the cheapness.
Judith, question to you. You said
Yeah.
discounting is not a strategy, but bundling is. And you have a question from the audience. Can you share some bundle ideas?
Yes. So bundling, for example, if you were to sell a pizza and you could bundle it with soft drinks, or you could bundle it with unlimited soft drinks, or you could bundle it with pizza and a beer. Or if you had a steak, you could bundle it with pairing wine, for example. Or if you were to give then, if you come instead of just coming for the main course, then you could bundle it with a free starter, and you could bundle it, or you could bundle it with a dessert, as an example. You just add some value that doesn't cost you a lot of money, an item that you might have already anyway. That could also become, that could also be a certain ritual that your restaurant is famous and known for. It could be a greeting from the kitchen, that is happening, or you might have something that you want to leave your guests with if there is any retail stock that you have, that you would like to give away with that.
Two more questions for you, Judith. One is, how do we approach pricing during inflation or rising food costs? And the second is, well, let's do this one. The other one is on portion size and price.
Yeah. So in terms of the increasing food cost, that again, and when you come back to your menu engineering grid, you need to take a look at, which items are selling and which food items do you need. And then I would take a step back and see then how are you sourcing these food items? Are there any other suppliers that you might be able to go with? Are you able to switch certain items that are part of the recipe and part of the ingredients? That's what I would take a look at. If one place has multiple restaurants, I would also take a look at how are the items ordered, because often the ingredients are built, and that's where it gets very technical now in the recipe management system. But then each chef builds their own recipes, and then you might be ordering then let's say the tomatoes or your meat from different suppliers, but you could actually help consolidate. That also helps to reduce the food cost. And then also if the food cost is updated correctly, when it's received, that also gives you a much better idea on what your true food cost is, because often the food cost is just assumed as a lump sum by finance, but it doesn't reflect what the true food cost is. And what was the second question, Joe?
Do we adjust portion size, price, or ingredients first?
Yeah. So in terms of, and that again depends what type of restaurant you are. The portion size is a very good starting point to adjust so that the end consumer doesn't, that is not too obvious. And then ingredients, again, it depends, what you want to sell and what your stars are. So it's a very fine balance, and there is no one size fits all, and that really needs to be analyzed, and it might even differ per dish, and it might even differ per meal period.
I have one more question, Judith, and then I'll leave it back to you.
Yeah.
Is the menu matrix affect the menu engineering?
Yes, it does. So it's when the menu engineering matrix that gives you then the data black and white in terms of what is performing. The chefs, you know what's selling high. Okay, so in the restaurant, you know what your best-selling items are. You know what is popular, what is not so popular. You also often know then, here we have the luxury of having a lot of different nationalities. You then also know which nationality prefers which meal item over another. But then the matrix, when you actually break it down all the way to your puzzles, your stars, your dogs, etc., that then also tells you which one is really your most profitable item on the menu, because the one that sells the most might be actually burning your profits. And then you have other items that just need a bit of tweaking that could be converted into stars. If then also then the waiter then knows it. And that's where it really becomes a cohesive approach. If the chef says, this is my most profitable item, that's what I want to push. That's in how you can train the waiters to actually talk about that item, and that's the chef's recommendation, then on the menu. And that's what we're going into now for the menu design, is you don't explain menus, they sell themselves or they don't. And that's where it's very important on how you place the items. It's one on how you name the item, how you describe it, where you place it, how and where to display the price. And those are some really impactful and simple changes that you can make basically after this meeting. Customers will pay up to 15% more for the same food item with a fancier name. And 2% of the diners prefer restaurants with locally sourced ingredients. And it depends, then what sounds more attractive? Is it the Canadian tomato and sweet onion salad? Or is it the tomato and onion salad? Is it the rustic home-style lasagna or just the lasagna? And it's also then how you describe it. And that's where you can work together with your commercial departments. They can help you describe it. Have the chef talk about, and the chefs, they are very creative, when it comes to creating their menus. But then the commercial departments, they can actually take that menu to life. It's also in terms of then the deco pricing, then when you have items, and you don't just have to have this for bottles, you can also have this for steak, for example, or for different types of fish, whether it's the grams. If you want the customer to buy the item that cost you $30, It's just the nature of humans that we always go for what's in the middle. And then, yes, Mona, there's another question.
Yes, and it's actually a very nice one. Very nice one. How can we implement the dine around without affecting the cost? I have quite a few questions, but I'm just going to pick two for now.
Yeah. So the dine around, that again, it all comes back to the menu engineering grid, is where you need to take a look at which items are very high in cost. And those are now the items that I would just simply remove from the menu and focus on the items that are not as high in cost. You can still have some that are, that are costly if you need to have the mix and the diversity. But don't get too hung up on being innovative now just because of the cost item. You can also implement the dine around and then evaluate that week on week, what gets eaten and what doesn't get eaten. What's costing you a lot of money and what doesn't cost you a lot of money. Those are the things. It's a lot of it is now with experimenting to see what works for your outlet. It's where you work collectively then together with the F&B operations, and then also then again coming back to which item you want to push through, where then the commercial departments can help you to promote it.
One more question for you. And remember, we really, really have cross-regional attendance. All of the GCC, North Africa, we even have some non-Middle East and Africa attendance. So this is a question for you from outside UAE. How do we optimize revenues when the prime cost, food and labor, is already too high to maneuver?
Very good. That's when I would take a look at your overall pricing. Is your pricing then too low in comparison to what the cost is? And how does your menu compare to your competition? What is the benchmark? And then are you able to, that comes back to what we looked at earlier. Do you have dishes on your menu that are very time and labor intensive that you might be able to make adjustments in order then to push more items out and to create efficiencies then behind the scene? But if now the pricing and inflation increases, your selling price needs to correlate with that. But then can you then also implement now, if it's now, for example, if your destination is now in a tourism season, if it's now in a high season, are you able to increase your food prices slightly? And then in the off season, you change the menu depending on what's actually then also in season to reduce the food cost. And the items that you're currently sourcing, are those now in season or are they coming from far away? And that's why the food cost is high. That's why I would really take a look at the entire menu and see what can be adjusted in order to offset some of that. Then also menus are becoming a lot more creative, and I would encourage you to take a look at your menu versus the menu that the competition is having and see what is it that you like about your menu the best and what is it that the competition might be doing better than your menu. And then you also do this exercise with your team. You don't want to have the price point talking to you at first. You want to make sure that the menu item is placed so that it converts, that I'm not getting distracted by how much it costs, especially now if you're in destinations that is price sensitive or where then, the cost is going up for everybody. But you want the customer to choose the menu item because they feel inspired by it. Anything that has a dollar signs is destructive, or any currency sign really, and you've got 109 seconds until the end, until then your guest or your customer then, loses then the focus and the attention span. Decimals is something that I would highly recommend to remove, and then also think about the Google heat map in the old days. It's when you go onto Google, what captures your eye? And ideally, you have your highest profitable item is placed on the menu on the top left-hand side because those are the items that convert. And then you can help guide the decisions. You can put the entrees, you can have the starters, but then you can also have items in boxes that then refer to the chef's choice or the recommendation. What are the most popular items when you go into restaurants? And that way, then also you're helping to reduce the comparison. But you have to be careful that you don't overwhelm the end consumer and that it's a nicely structured menu. But that comes also back to reducing the offering that you have. And my recommendation is that you have no more than, 2 pages. Or it's like a twofold, or you have like small claps on the side. You also need to remember that a lot of the menus nowadays are available digitally, and then it's even more challenging to navigate and to place the items that you want to convert. And the end consumer is not choosing the cheapest item, it's just they're choosing, what's really the safest bet. Data is very important, and that's where it gets a bit nerdy. It's you manage the space, the time, and the price. And earlier in the presentation, I mentioned about the systems. Take a look at your systems. Take a look how the space has been set up. Take a look at the times, the peak hours. That's really your most valuable asset. And is your timing, your meal period, is that right during the peak hours? And can you allow more time in your off season? And your restaurant reservation systems, they all have the capabilities. A lot of times restaurants, they're set up for 3 hours dining, but in certain destinations, the guest doesn't sit for 3 hours anymore. And you might have destinations where guests just like to sit and chat. So that's something that you have to decide with the team what makes sense. The menu prices, is a very important revenue decision, what they should be. And then also then the data, what you measure is what you can improve. Yes, Mona. Mona, you have some more questions?
Yes, sorry, I was
Yeah.
on mute. Some more questions, yes, indeed. When operating in an all-inclusive model, apart
Yes.
from multi-board models, how do we maximize F&B revenue, which would indirectly affect overall pricing?
That's an excellent question. And I think when it comes to all-inclusive models, there it very much depends and also on your length of stay that you have, because the longer the guest stays, the more profitable that guest stay is going to be. I've seen all-inclusive properties that then also have a premium wine list, for example, a premium beverage list, or then they do have upselling opportunities within the menu if it's an a la carte restaurant and not just a buffet restaurant. Then you still have add-ons that you can do, whether it's for your starters, whether it's for your main course, or then also for the dessert, and then also very much for the restaurant for the beverage list.
One more. Which
Mm-hmm.
is most profitable? Selling at lower price with huge number of covers or higher price against less covers? With taking into consideration there are more, I think, competitors selling at the same range price I have or even less.
Yeah. No, that's an excellent question. And that comes back down to your food cost. So it's if it always depends on the food cost margin on what is then the right decision to do. But and then also if that's the meal that the customers are coming in, you can then also try, if it's already selling a high volume, then increase it by, like the equivalent of $1, because that dollar goes straight down to the bottom line. You're not going to spend any more money by having that dish for another dollar. But if you sell less at a higher price point versus sell more at a lower price point is very much in correlation to the food cost.
Having demand on ribeye, US quality in Egypt, costs are increasingly affected by the inflation and won't continue selling it. What's your recommendation as need to keep my customers happy, I guess?
Yeah. And then I think that's where I would check, are you bound to the US ribeye, or could you get the ribeye from another
Another market.
destination where it's
Mm.
going to be less expensive to source? Or if it's in high demand from your customers, would the customer pay another, $2 or $3 for it just to keep it on the menu?
One more. I think that's a very general. What's the best way to price the item? It takes you back to what you were saying at the beginning.
Yeah. It does. So it really depends then again, what is your competition doing? And then also take a step back. Is that the real competition? Do you have to revisit your competition? But then also, what is it that you can offer different to your competition? And not just in terms of items that are on the menu, but in terms of offering, in terms of the customer journey, in terms of on how you're bookable, how you promote, how you value, how you engage with the customer, how you make the customer feel so that they come back. Do when you break down your customers that are coming dining with you, are you able to capture how often they have been with you? Do you then maybe also have a VIP customer database, where they don't need to book whenever they come, they always have a table. It's these type of little nuances that really make a big difference. Then, if you wanted to keep the sirloin as an example on the menu, but it costs you a lot, could you just simply do a sirloin night and then you just buy more of the steak in order to get a lower price point instead of just having it available selectively? So there are many different ways strategically on how you can approach that. And then maybe just it simply becomes a special that isn't available every single day, but it's a week, and then that's what the customer then comes for. And then it's to track what actually drives the profit. It's obviously the gross margin per dish, the average spend per cover, the whole sales mix, and then also the upsell rate. And the upselling can happen in the menu design that we looked at earlier, is that it becomes a customer-led journey, or it becomes then a waiter interaction with the customer, where they do prepare, where the waiter says, this is our most popular item, would you like to try it? Or then if anything is paired then also with beverages or then with a dessert. One item, just coming back to the meal portions, what I also found a lot in the industry, that if your main course is too big, that also then reduces then the space and the appetite for dessert. And the same thing then also for the starter. So that's where you have to see then, is the portions that you have, are they sized just right so that I still want to have a starter, and then maybe also then a dessert. And the speed beats perfection. It's important that you observe and you read your weekly numbers, and not just by your average check and the covers that you've had, but really dive down deep. The grid that I showed you earlier, it's quite simple to implement. You don't have to take all the dishes off the menu, but start with your top selling ones and then go through and actually then say which one is the most profitable item. And then you to decide and then to act. And then whatever you do, then implement that within 48 hours. Make sure that you have that strategic meeting amongst with the team so that everybody knows where the focus is, because only then they can support. If then also from a procurement perspective, the procurement team is in the loop, what you want to achieve, they can also help with the sourcing and with the help of keeping the food costs down. And then your team is also a revenue engine. Like every single interaction, recommendation, suggesting, the pairing, each one is a revenue menu. And it doesn't have to be intrusive. It can be just as part of the normal conversation. Make sure that they know the product, that they have tasted the product, that the team knows how to sell the menu better. And then with every single training, it's an investment. If you want to try, you always have these, the restaurant standard meetings, the briefings before the shift starts. Take a look at the VIP list. Take a look at, how well you know the client. And then also, collaborate then with the chef on which item you want to sell, you want to push today. And a lot of it then is really by the trialing and by the experimenting. and make sure that your team has very clear objectives and the daily targets, because what gets measured gets done. And where the money disappears is then if there is no upselling, if there is no pairing, and if there is no guidance, if the guests are left, left alone to choose. I once worked with with a restaurant, and the waiter was very good in selling the starters and selling the desserts, was very good in upselling within the menu, but the wine sales were down. And that's really how granular we went. And then we asked the question, why are the wine sales, down? Why are you not selling the wine? Are you not comfortable selling the wine? And then the waiter said, no, it's just I don't know anything about the wine. So I just point to the next best glass and then hope that the customer buys it. So then what we did in the training, we gave him then, a 2 hours training with a sommelier, and we did sommelier training with the whole team. And that then also built the confidence, because a lot of times the guests, they understand the wines better than the restaurant employees. The upselling is guiding and not pushing. That's very important. On arrival, ordering, post-main, would you like to have a drink by the bar first? Can I place your order now? And then also then later on. Talk about the promotions that you might have coming up in the future. And then also encourage the guests to follow you on social media. On the innovation side, now this is also very, it's a good opportunity to take a look at what could you do differently? How can you set yourself apart from the competition? Not just by what you have on the menu, but coming back to the storytelling and taking the guests onto the journey. The pandemic has tested every single model. I mean, that's when the QR menus appeared, the cloud kitchens, the delivery first, the meal kits came out. So there was a lot of innovation that came out of that. And that's also what I would see this as an opportunity, is then to take a look at, what is a low risk? How can you achieve more reach? And then also how can you achieve the better margins? So innovation is efficiency, and then also then being the flexibility. And the one item test is, does it make money? That's when you calculate the true margin, food cost, prep time, the waste, and is it actually profitable? Does your team sell it? Is it operationally efficient? And do you want to keep it, fix it, or do you want to remove it? The revenue protection framework, that's when you protect, you redirect, and you capture. And that's every decision you make in a pressured market falls into one of three categories. But even if you're now calling in from a market that is not under pressure, get your restaurant ready. There's always something that you can improve. And every single percentage that you improve in terms of the revenue leakage or the revenue growth over the years will have a huge impact. Plus your team is ready, because eventually, markets, they become under pressure. It's just a normal cycle, unfortunately, that we have to go through. And those that are ready for it, they will come out of this much, much stronger. So I'd like to leave you with a 30-day action plan that you can do with your team. Is take a look at the menu. If there's anything that you can cut, that you would like to cut, that you would like to try to cut. Fix your pricing, do the benchmarking against the competition. You might be spot on with your pricing, but there might be tweaks for certain dishes that you can do. Train the team. Review the weekly data and test one new idea. So this could be on how you're placing your dish that you want to push on the menu. Maybe reduce the menu, change the layout, make sure that you have no currency, that you don't have the price screaming at you. And I would also encourage you, every time you go out and you dine at a restaurant, take a look at the menu and take a look at, when you open up the menu, which dish captures your eye. And is that then the dish that you would want to purchase? And then also then reflect yes or no. Do you find it easy to navigate through the menu, or is it difficult? Yes, Mona.
Well, we have one person that wants to ask you the question. So we're opening Amir Khan's audio visual. So Amir, go ahead. Jean, who's
Yeah,
getting Amir in?
he's in. He just needs to unmute himself.
Unmute yourself, Amir. Okay. He'll unmute himself shortly. And Ashish as well. Ashish, maybe unmute yourself.
Hello.
Yes, Ashish.
Hi. I put it in the QA, but I think in the flow we could mention it. But just quickly, two questions, Judith. One is how do you differentiate your choices so that you don't fall into the trap of competition, not just for the same fast-moving item that we're talking about, but also the price war, avoiding that. Because as you said, you have to be competitive and you try to price yourself based on various factors, including competition. That's more important. So that's one part.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent question, Ashish. Thank you for that. Look, and that's always a challenging one, the price war, where does it go? And that's important then to differentiate how do you position yourself against the competition? If you were to reduce your pricing, what would the competition do? Would they go further down? And then you go further down and you go further down. And I think, that's just where it comes back to the innovation. Then how can you outsmart the competition? What is it that you can offer, and how do you engage with your existing guest? But then also, how do you engage with a new customer who is then coming or who hasn't tried your restaurants yet? That's really important. And then in terms of the cutting the pricing, that's where I would recommend is then the bundling. Because then when you bundle, it's a perceived value versus just the discounting. And then you
Totally.
could make this a special. You don't have to do everything, but at least you get the customers through the door by having these bundles. And then they might still they might still purchase up. I can't find the right way now. Buy up. They still might buy up on the menu based on the interaction with the waiters.
Understood. So, is it good to say that a la carte as well as the menu on the buffet can be used in the same way? I mean, this thought I just shared can be applied in
Yeah.
both scenarios. Because I would believe in some cases I have seen in the past some companies they would do circulation of the menus on buffet on quarterly basis, for
Yeah.
example.
Yeah. No, it's the on the buffets, it's more challenging to see, which ones are the profitable items because you don't track every single item that is used. You just see what's in demand. But that comes back to then the seasonality and how much is the customer able to spend. And do you have the lobster year round available on the buffet, or do you only have the lobster available on the buffet when you also have your peak season customer in? Do you
So,
then adjust the buffet pricing based on your seasonality?
got it.
Or it's you're also able to give certain promotions to closed user groups, so then it's not in everybody's face, and you still keep your brand integrity.
Got it.
Or I've seen our restaurants, which I think, as a parent, I've seen restaurants, not just here in the GCC and not just now during the slowdown. I've seen restaurants do this in other places, is that you go and the kids dine and eat for free. And then they have a kids entertainment service, which I think is fantastic, especially for buffet restaurants. Then you can
Hmm.
enjoy that as a parent. The kids, they only nibble on the buffet anyway. And that's something that I've never understood, why then buffet restaurants, they charge the kids the full price.
Got it. So
Yeah.
make that explains. Just a quick second one. The taste is, as we all know, is always the king. So what's the best practice that you will suggest that we can apply in ensuring the consistency, specifically while also considering that change in the vendors and suppliers, as you mentioned, to maintain our the food costs, etc., and compiling into consolidating into ordering for different restaurants, as you mentioned earlier,
Yeah.
that may have any implication or any impact on the quality of food which is prepared or served on specific restaurants.
Yeah. So the food quality, I would not compromise on. But that's then where I would go back to see which ones are the items that have a high food cost? And are those still the items that you want to have on the menu? Or do you want to focus on the items that actually are profitable? It depends on how often are those items used and how do these items then fit your strategy. But if you have items on there on the menu that are high in food cost, but they're not being utilized as much, then the kitchen still has to purchase them. And that is what's increasing your overall food cost because you need to have these items available on the menu. And you
Mm.
can't say, oh, sorry, that's not available today. And that's where I would take a look at, is it does that menu item, does that dish still warrant a space on the menu?
I get that. I think the more concerning part, which I think and I'm using this, as an example, being myself as a consumer, when I go to F&B, to one of the restaurants, etc., and I see the similar restaurant in a different location, having a different food tastes, whereas the menu item is exactly the same. And it comes back probably to a question, how it is conducive to make sure that you are sourcing the same ingredient from a specific supplier or a vendor, because it makes a lot of difference to your food taste, which actually ultimately comes out because of the change in or item. So that was the main perception of this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you, Ashish. Judith, I'm just wary of time, and we're 5 minutes away from 5 p.m.
Yeah.
I do have few more questions, but I also want to capture the audience feedback. How would you like us to do that? Shall I get the feedback first, and then maybe those that have some questions, we can sit back? Can I ask you to stay
Yeah.
back for maybe 5-10 more minutes?
Yeah, no, that's a great idea. So I'm going to stop sharing the screen now. So this was the last slide. It's, there's always a 15 to 30% revenue opportunity. And it's again, it's not just the cost and the selling. Also take a look at your system setup. You'll find a lot of when you do a deep dive into your restaurant reservation system, into your meal periods and everything, you might find quite a few bottlenecks that you can clear. The terms and conditions, and also how your waiters are trained.
Thank you, Judith. Stay with us for I still have quite a few questions to go through and want to ensure everything is answered. Two things. Can I just quickly ask those? We still have 125 attending with us. So can I quickly ask you to cast your feedback? Remember, these skilling and upskilling sessions are purely for you. We have planned an AI session again for next Wednesday. So next Wednesday, we will be going back into AI and learning more about Claude, because we've all started now shifting from ChatGPT and Claude, and they do differ. So that's next week's session, and we go back again the week after into more F&B topics. So we would really welcome your feedback. So if I can kindly ask you to scan the feedback form, and I'll give you 2 minutes to answer very simple questions before we go back to Q&A. The lovely colleagues that have asked questions, stay back. We will get your questions answered. Jean, alert me when you want me to stop the feedback and go back to Q&A. And Judith, this was excellent, really. Thank you.
Thank you, my pleasure.
I still have more questions coming in now. And really, thank you in advance for whatever feedback you provide us, because we just want to ensure that those Wednesday sessions are meaningful, and we bring you the right content that you want to attend. You got your feedbacks, Jean?
Yes. We have a few.
Okay, 1 more minute. Okay, so would you like to look at the questions, Judith? I think we may not, I've already answered those that we were able to attend live, but there is a question here about room service. How can I increase sales in room service while keeping costs down?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Also room service, treat it like a restaurant. Look at the items which are profitable versus which items are, not profitable, which ones take a long time to produce and which ones are not. That all it comes down. It's then also on the room service menu, how do you place them? How do you price them? It's the same approach as you do have for the restaurants. I'm just reading through the some of the questions.
So maybe you can bundle them even.
Yeah, I just need to read bit by bit. The dine around, I think we had earlier.
Yeah, look at the ones that still have type and answer, because these are the ones that were not answered towards the end, Judith.
Okay, yeah,
Go
yeah, yeah.
towards the end. Everyone that was answered live, I activated it.
Yeah, how can you track food waste across prep service and plate return, in which specific processes are responsible for the highest loss in value, not just volume? There are some really good food waste systems and technology now available. Otherwise, it's very difficult to produce. And if you need help in finding or sourcing, what good food waste systems there are, Mona might have some of them on Explore Tech available for you to have a quick look. How do you differentiate your choices so that you don't fall into the trap of competition, not just for the same fast-moving item, but also the price war? I think we had that earlier.
Let's close it with
Yeah.
the last question, I think.
Yeah.
Instead of lowering prices after the pandemic, what are some practical tricks restaurants can use to keep customers spending? With increased cost pressure after the pandemic, what are the most effective ways to protect margins without making customers feel prices are too high? I think that would be our closing question, and we close today.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. In terms of like practical tips for the restaurants, I think that's just where I would say then, it comes back down to the bundling. But before anybody puts anything into practice, what you really have to get back to is you have to analyze the data. You have to take a look at the menu engineering matrix. You have to align with the team, because otherwise you make changes that don't go anywhere, and this is something that we constantly see. It's take the data, and once you have the data, once you're happy with the data, analyze what is your most profitable items, and then see and evaluate how this could be changed and what you want to be. Then also if how do you want your restaurant to evolve over the next 12 months? You always need to have a new story. You need a new hook. Just position yourself, across social media. And then the people that you follow or the items that you follow, if they talk every day about the same thing, you unfollow them. And so what hook is it that you can create for your restaurant, that keeps the customer interested? And then that hook is then again something that you give to the commercial teams that they can speak to, whether you're an independent restaurant or you are a restaurant within a hotel, it doesn't matter. You need to have that hook. What is the reason for me to come? Most restaurants now, these days, it really doesn't matter where you go, which destination. You have your steak, you have your fish, you have your pasta, you have your salad. It doesn't matter where you go. And then sometimes you have your pizza and your burger. So I have so many restaurants, I can have all these items, but why should I come to your restaurant to have any one of these?
Well said, Judith. With that, I say thank you so much. Thank you for all those that have attended with us. I hope you found it beneficial. Please continue to share your feedback. Again, I repeat, these sessions are for you, not for us. So the more feedback we receive from our community on what topics you want, the more we will bring in the right content for you. So, Judith, thank you very much for your time, and thank you for everyone for attending. We hope to welcome you next week, Wednesday, every Wednesday, 4 p.m. GST. There is a different topic. Next week's topic is on Claude. So I'm looking forward to that because I use more of Claude than I use with my ChatGPT. And Jean is putting the registration link already for next week's session. So thank you.
Thanks a lot for having me, Mona. Thank you very much, everyone,
Our
for
pleasure,
joining.
Judith. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.